Recording in progress.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for showing up today for the Tree and Design Review Board meeting of January 23rd. So I guess Marshall is not with us today, but could we do a roll call, John?
Yes. Christine Lovell.
Present.
Lynn Dealer. Here. Chair Lars Langberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Melissa Hanley.
Present.
And Carrie Bush.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum and all members are present.
Great. Thank you, John. We have no minutes to approve or review today, so we could go to any planning department updates.
Sure, we've got quite a few. The first one, after this meeting, actually, we will be having the public comment period for the draft EIR that was done for the Canopy project, which is at the north end of town behind the O'Reilly media park. Part of CEQA requires us to hold a public meeting and have members of the public and interested agencies provide comments for a 45-day period. And during the final EIR, those comments are addressed and then will be submitted along with the entitlements to the Planning Commission for either a recommendation to council for approval of the project. So that is moving forward. That following meeting hopefully will be sometime in March. And the other thing that we received 3 proposals for the Sustainable Transportation Grant that looks at the downtown core and revitalizing that a little bit. So we will be reviewing those proposals and then selecting a applicant for that and go forward with a contract and proposal to start that work. Let's see if you want to add anything, Carrie.
Sure.
Go
No, I
right
think
ahead.
just for the Canopy project that John was talking about, the 80 units, that will require design review, and that usually comes to the DRB after council approves because there's a tentative map, and if they have any changes to the design, then we like them to be able to integrate any significant changes before it comes to the DRB. So that'll be early spring, probably. And then, as most of you probably saw, I am leaving the city at the end of February, relocating and for personal reasons. So I just want to say, if I'm not at your next meeting, which I probably will be actually, but it has been a pleasure working with all of you. So thank you, and thank you for your service to the city. Yes, I'm resigning effective the end of February. Okay. Sorry, I did send out the email before the meeting, but it wasn't that long before the meeting, so it depends on how quick you are on your emails.
Not in this case.
And then just in terms of the Woodmark progress update for construction, it sounds like they do now have water and fire sprinklers on their site, which is one of their big conditions before they can do vertical construction. So we do anticipate they'll be starting to see buildings soon.
I have a question regarding that. Actually, we have buildings appearing, but how much of that project are they building in the first phase? I mean, in terms of its...
Sure. So phase 1 is 48 units plus the community, central courtyard area with the playground and the community common spaces, the laundry rooms and that kind of stuff.
So are the buildings on Bodega Avenue, are those 3-story buildings?
Correct. So it'll be those 2 buildings, and then kind of as you enter on the east entrance, that next building, and then as you exit the next building in. So it's the 36 units in the 2 or 3 buildings in the back. That would be the phase 2.
And what was the reason? Do you know why they were jackhammering out the face of the concrete on Bodega
I don't know.
Avenue?
That would be a question for the building department.
Okay.
Do they have an anticipated date of delivery for phase 2?
They do not at this time. For phase 1, they are their current construction schedule would have them finishing at the end of this calendar year. So, and we are already getting a lot of kind of inquiries about rental and people who need housing. And so we do have on our website, if you know of anyone who is interested in that, it is income restricted, and their first phase is being done with USDA, so it is farm worker housing. But there is contact information for people who want to get on a list for interest on there. And then the second phase is not restricted at this time. They may, they don't have funding for it. So once they have identified funding, it could be senior, it could be family, it could be whatever set of, if there are restrictions to the funding, obviously, but otherwise it's not restricted, other than the income levels.
Can I ask about the grant, the Sustainable Transportation Grant? What is the timeline for reviewing and awarding that contract?
So it'll be over the next month that we're reviewing the proposals, doing any interviews, follow-up, negotiating contract, and then it'll go to council for approval either end of February, beginning of March, depending on if it's a, lengthy negotiation to get it to the right scope and make sure we are doing everything that Caltrans is requiring us to do for the grant.
Yeah. And then I also want to ask about the Hotel Sebastopol. I think you said you were going to have a meeting with them at some point recently.
Yes, and actually, Larry, I'm going to ask you, is there any update from that meeting? So as far as I understand it, you can just correct me if I'm wrong, their federal archaeology approval, which I know I've talked about before, that they need approval for, is a 1 to 2 year timeline. They're about 1 year in for that. So they are still waiting on that component of it, which is a piece of their financing requirements. So
that process has already taken a year, you're saying? Mm-hmm.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I knew about that process.
Yeah. And no end in sight. So
Well, the anticipated is not more than 2 years, I guess, from the federal government. Is that correct, Larry? For the archaeology component of their approvals, the federal archaeology that yeah, go ahead. So Larry, as you know, is retired. That's the other news. Don Swartz is our new city manager, but Larry is now only the very important title of city attorney. So.
Right. Yes, they may just be a matter of months away from getting that final approval. So that's the optimistic viewpoint. The pessimistic viewpoint is it might be theoretically a year. We're looking at options with them and exploring that this week, actually. So there's work ongoing to try and assure that project will be built, but there's also an optimism that it might not be that long.
Mm-hmm.
So Larry, what exactly are they doing regarding the archaeology? Is it just paperwork we're waiting for? Or?
I think the planning director has a better way to explain that than I probably
Sure. So
do.
they are in contract with the archaeology department for services with Sonoma State University, which I heard is no longer striking. That proposal of process recovery, all that kind of stuff, had to go through the state SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office. It has gone through that. That was when I first heard about it. And then it is now on to federal review. And so they are reviewing all of that information.
But what exactly are they looking at? Like, did they do digging out there, or are they looking at historical use of the land, or what are they?
No, archaeology isn't
Yeah.
They know the historical use. And there was a phase 1 archaeology that was done when they demolished the Diamond lumber mill building. So they did have a couple of findings from that. And so that's part of what's, how are they going to deal with that? And that kind of
Okay,
stuff.
so there were actual findings.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just like there were at Rite Aid, sorry, not Rite Aid, but the CVS and a couple others. Yeah. But because this is the federal funding, they have a very different process. And I can tell you from having worked on housing projects where there's state funding versus federal funding, it is a very different, more complex process once you get to the federal funding level. So.
Right. Okay, thank you.
They were also working
Thanks,
with
Larry.
Caltrans about
Encroachment permit.
getting the encroachment. How's that going?
That is well underway, actually. I think that is moving along, and same with the PG&E. We should be finalizing the paperwork for their lot merger this week for them to record, and then that's part of their PG&E entitlement. So, yep.
Great.
Yeah, they're keeping moving everything they can keep moving
Right.
to make sure that when they do get the go ahead and are able to start, that it's a smooth process, as it can be.
Great, thank you.
Actually, sorry, last question. Has the program of the project remained intact despite the economic influences?
Yes, they have not asked for any significant changes or amendments to the design or the program. I actually was the person who reviewed the building permit, which is now, issued and ready to act on. And I know we had gone with a couple amendments right after design review, but they haven't asked for any since then. So, yep.
Great.
Yep.
All right, thank you for that.
Can I ask about the Habitat project?
What?
Habitat for Humanity project on
Main Street.
Main Street.
Yeah, it is still in their building permit phase. I know that they're finalizing or going through some final tentative map and final map recordings and such. So that is still moving forward.
All right, thanks very much, John and Carrie.
And I think probably one other development project is the Benedetti Car Wash has submitted their building permit. So,
All right. Then we're moving on to comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. If there's anybody who'd like to bring up a comment other than our two agenda items, please do so now, or anything on the Zoom. M. Kelly.
And we didn't receive any public comments for
Okay,
items not on the
great.
agenda.
All right. Then, are there any statements of conflicts of interest from the board today? Seeing none, let's move on to our regular agenda. We have two items on the agenda, both tree removal items. Our first one is at 6700 Sebastopol Avenue. John, you want to fill us in on that?
Sure. So this is, the project is seeking removal from the tree board or approval from the tree board for the removal of a protected bunya monkey puzzle tree at 6700 Sebastopol Avenue on the corner of Highway 12 and Morris Street. The application provided is requesting the removal of one tree that is approximately 75 to 80 feet tall with a diameter breast height of 35 inches. There are also long branches that extend from this tree horizontally, ranging from 6 to 15 feet. For those that are here in the public, and we can show it on the screen if we can, we do have one of those fronds so people can see what they look like.
yeah, I think we also brought it for the DRB just because just the tactility of how sharp they are and being able to understand that from when Jennifer first brought it, I've never seen one in person, so that is was new to me.
Yeah, so going back to the report, this project was brought to the board on their November 28th design review board meeting, but due to a noticing issue, the board only received a preliminary report on this. So they conducted the hearing, heard a staff report, and heard public comment. However, no deliberation or decision was discussed or conducted. And as the preliminary review was done, staff requested any input from the board regarding a request for additional information they might need to formally deliberate the application. At the time, the board requested to see the application again when there was a tenant so that they could review the tree removal within the context of any future tenants for that space as part of the application's project description or applicant's project description. Since the time, the applicant has requested that the tree removal permit be considered again, solely in light of the continued safety issues of the tree for the current site conditions. The applicant finds that these are a massive concern and prohibitive for forcing or for procuring a tenant, and as noted, the city's arborist report did find removal of this tree due to safety concerns, and those concerns being justified. So with that, the staff is recommending that the tree be removed with the appropriate conditions, and the applicant is here as well as the city's arborist if the board has any further questions.
Great, thank you, John. Any questions of staff about their report?
I'd like to ask a question of Becky.
Okay, thanks, Becky. Come on up.
Hi, thanks for being here. So in reading your report, you state that the tree is healthy and that it could represent a safety concern, but is that, I guess I'm asking, does this tree deserve to come down based on its current health and its current location?
Thinking about the whole process more, I think that it might be a good idea to really condition this on having a firm site plan in hand for development of that spot. Because right now, it may have some, it's certainly, a guardian at the entrance to the city and it's iconic, but it is hazardous. Those things are really sharp. I've, never, handled them before the last meeting either. And the cones can weigh 15 pounds. Chip Sanborn has shared some with me, and they're pretty impressive. But I really think that we don't want to put the cart before the horse, because sometimes plans have changed at the last minute for applicants, and they've decided, well, the economic conditions, are forcing us to close, and we're not going to have any outdoor use of this property anymore. So if I would still feel good about recommending that it's removed if there's going to be a lot of activity there, because they were talking about having a top, little play area and small children and adults. And I think it was 2012 when Caltrans changed the sidewalk through that area, and they left it undisturbed in the area of that tree just to avoid cutting the roots from that tree and the other trees. But I think that it really does restrict the use of that space. So I think it's fair to say that because of the hazard of ongoing removals, it takes a more than annual maintenance to remove the dead fronds and the dead and the live cones. So
Is it a hazard to the sidewalk or just to the area of the tenant space?
it's pretty much, it depends on how windy it is. I would say within maybe a 20-foot radius of the trunk that it is hazardous when those things fall and the larger branches fall, fronds, and the cones. It's hard to say how they're going to come down.
And if
So-
you were going to recommend semi-annual maintenance, how frequently would you recommend?
I think it would need to be either annual or even semi-annual to remove dead fronds, because they drop a lot. Just walking under it, you'll see a lot of them on the ground.
Yeah.
So if the tenant would agree to do that kind of maintenance, removing the fronds and at least annually removing the cones, that's pretty much the schedule that most tree services go to on the trees they maintain. Chip Sanborn's company maintains another one in the city of Santa Rosa, and they have to do that.
Is that the one in Courthouse Square?
Don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Maybe while you're up there, does anybody else have any
Yes, I
questions
have
for
no
Becky?
questions. Okay, so first of all, as part of the semi-annual maintenance, would it be reasonable to assume that you could trim back the cones if they started to get too large?
And also just to pick up the dead fronds when they drop, because if people walk on them, they're very sharp and very stiff.
Right. well, people should watch where they're walking. But with these cones, would it be reasonable to assume as cones start to get larger that you could just trim them off as opposed to having a 15-pound cone on the tree that could fall?
That's what they've been doing in the past, and that's what they do with most of those trees in urban areas.
And again, I asked the question, which I asked you before. What is the number of people that we have recorded that have been injured by this tree in its history?
I have no idea of the number, but I know that they have caused injuries, and
This tree, I'm talking about this.
this tree, because it's not where there's traffic, pedestrian traffic or parking, I don't think that it has caused injury to my knowledge.
Could maintenance also be a factor here in its not causing injury?
It has been maintained, and it's a little
Right.
bit unclear about who's been maintaining it.
No, Becky, the Barlow has been maintaining
The
it as
Barlow
well.
has
Yes.
been.
Yep.
Okay. But I mean, even, I've been with Sebastopol for 30 years, and I don't know who did it before the Barlow. But anyway, it has been maintained in the past. And it takes a climber or a lift truck to get up there.
Do you know, I heard that the City of Santa Rosa Fire Department actually maintains the one in Courthouse Square and uses it as a training exercise.
sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
That the City of Santa Rosa Fire Department actually uses the one in Courthouse Square as a training exercise, and they actually maintain it and use it to climb and take down the cones.
I'm not sure. That would be an interesting thing to find out. I don't know.
Okay, I just would make a comment on a comment that you made, which you were saying about having some sort of specific plan before you decide to cut the tree down, knowing specifically what the plan is. And we have actually precedent, and I think a requirement for that, which we've started on earlier projects because people were cutting down trees and then not doing the project. So
Exactly. I've experienced that in Sebastopol. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Any other questions for Becky? Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Duckles. I appreciate your report. It was helpful. You mentioned at the end of it that it should be removed and replaced by an attractive specimen to add to this main entrance to the city. I think it's piggybacking on other things that have been said, and that was what our board requested to see, that the application, we would like to see how would we respond to a design and how it affects the impact of the tree. And what we're wanting to understand is how would we understand if we remove a tree, how would another tree or an additional attractive large specimen go into a site without knowing its design parameters or constraints? So you mentioned that earlier, and I appreciate that. How would we know that as a board? What the board had asked for was the actual design itself.
That's one of my pet things that I always bring up, and
Thanks.
that is that if it's removed, there's a very nice oak there, and there's there's other landscaping there, and so I think it would be really important to find out what their plan is for replacing it and how they will establish them, because everybody talks about replacement trees, but hardly ever anyone talks about watering them.
Yes, please.
Several members of the public brought to our attention that this might be a tree of historic importance, that Luther Burbank may have planted it. Do you have any information about that?
I have Luther Burbank's field manuals, and I looked in them, and he does talk about the genus, but he didn't really talk about that specific tree. But it's so unusual and so unique and so big and old. It could have been, but he didn't mention it in his manuals.
Okay. Another member of the public referenced that this tree could live to be 600 years old. Is that your understanding as well?
It could be.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one more question regarding the historical aspect. Given the exotic nature of this tree, during the time period when it was planted, who else would have procured such a specimen in this area at that time, other than Luther Burbank?
It's hard to imagine. It's likely that it was, but he had a lot of friends, and he was buddies with Thomas Edison, and it's hard to say, but it could have been from a traveler, but I'm not really sure. I haven't been able to find out anything about that.
All right, and I will note from staff, this is not on the city's historic list of resources. And, part of that is there's no actual lineage that shows that it is part of that history.
All right. Another question, Carrie?
Yes. So I was curious to see how we might possibly, has any thought been given to the idea of mitigating or trying to find a management method for fall protection?
For
fall protection. For example, if those are fallen, that's the idea of trying to provide it, because I know there's a canopy already currently right around where seismic, where it is, and there is some level of management, I think, for fall protection. We've seen a lot of those fronds on top of screening that they put up and that sort of thing.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really interesting idea. You could do something like, bird netting that's pretty much invisible higher up in the canopy, and it wouldn't really detract from it. So that's an idea. But and that house, I think there is, the oldest house in the city. I think it was 1904 maybe, or something like that. I don't know if anybody else knows, but that house is very old. So it was probably in existence when it was planted.
All right. Any other questions for staff, or Becky, or the planning director, or
Question
John?
for staff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Knuckles. I'm curious if when the Barlow was built or planned, if there was any restrictions to preserve that tree as part of the plan.
My understanding is that there were no restrictions, i.e. it needs to remain in perpetuity. And in fact, legally, and we've got our city attorney here, as I said, because we knew this is sort of a sensitive issue, it is illegal to sort of bind the hands of future boards if something were to become an issue, which is why we're here today. The design review, there was a request to remove it, I believe, and board member Deether was, I believe, on the design review board at that time. But it was determined that they would leave it as part of the design. So at that time, it was simply a part of the design, and this is sort of de facto a design review amendment, or a, hey, the tree, we really feel like it's an issue at this point. We would like, and that's where the application has come from.
Thank you for that. Any other staff questions at the moment? No? Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Becky. So we could hear from our applicant. If you'd like to say anything, you can come up to the podium.
Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm the property manager at the Barlow. In our last meeting where we weren't able to discuss the tree, there was a lot of talk about wanting to see these plans for what was going into the space, why this was all of a sudden becoming an issue. And the Barlow wanted everybody to consider the tree without thinking about somebody new coming in there, that the tree itself in its current position, where it is, even when seismic was there, was still a danger and a threat. I wasn't at the property manager at the time, but I know one of those large, very heavy pods did fall from the tree, and it landed on top of the steel structure that's there above the existing patio footprint and created substantial damage to a steel structure. So you can imagine if that was a human skull. And I am not aware of any true human damage or injury from the tree. We're trying to prevent that, and we want to reduce the risk and liability. I don't think the Barlow is passionate about taking down any trees. It's strictly just thinking about safety. It is still in very close proximity to the existing patio. If you walk on that sidewalk there, it's very close, and you can see those fronds. We maintain it, but I don't think there's any foolproof way to completely eliminate the risk. just because it's a very large tree, and I think there's some unpredictability there. And I'm not an arborist, and I don't know much about the tree personally, but the Barlow was hoping to consider the tree as a threat, even on the existing footprint that it's in now, even if the patio wasn't expanded. And that we are working with somebody that's potentially wanting to come in there and expand that patio, but I have no lease, I have no plans, and we're just hoping to just eliminate that risk. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I do.
Sure.
You said that the frond created substantial damage to a steel structure. Could you explain to me exactly what happened?
I cannot speak exactly as to what happened because I've only heard that as word of mouth and hearsay from Chip Sanborn, who owns that business. And I know the landlord has mentioned to me that that happened when the structure seismic existed. Not the fronds, so that's not one of those fronds that did that damage. It was one of the pods that's much heavier and much more substantial. And I've never seen one of those in person either. So I don't want to speak uneducated in regards to that.
Yeah, substantial damage to a steel structure kind of sounds like maybe the military industrial complex would like to use these pods.
Yeah.
Any other questions for our applicant? Lynn?
Yeah, as far as, I don't know if I'm on or off.
Try again.
That's a tricky one.
It's not coming on, but
I'll talk loud,
I can hear you.
so.
here's a new one. No, try it.
Something happens.
Something, go ahead.
Okay,
Thanks.
as far as you know, has there been any serious accidents caused by these fronds other than sore fingers?
Yeah, I am definitely not aware of any actual injury to a person or, a passerby, a vehicle, nothing like that.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for our applicant? No?
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. So we can now move to comments from the public on this agenda item. If there's anyone who would like to speak for 3 minutes, they can come up to the podium and tell us your name and give us any comment. We have a few audience members here. Come on up.
I'm Kathy Wills, and I own the property Ketty Corner from the tree, 6681 Sebastopol Avenue. And I know that Sebastopol has, in the past, supported the importance of trees and what they bring to the ambiance of the city. And I would like to say that I strongly support retaining this tree. I think that having some kind of a net for the things that sounds like they were, that is the cones themselves, that might be a problem, and that would keep them from coming down. And it seems like a low cost, effective way, because it sounds like the main problem is danger to people, and that would take care of that. So why not go that way? And cutting trees down, particularly this one, which is very, very unusual, I would really vote strongly for maintaining it and doing what we can and looking at it later. It's really a heritage tree. And any way that we can protect this, I think, is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. I, like the previous lady, is here to support keeping the tree. I love your point, Gary Bush, about management, that there is management for trees of this nature. I love your point, Stanley, that in Santa Rosa, the fire department is there to assist in the care of the trees so that there aren't any problems. And I think that when there are solutions seemingly easier solutions to keep safety, to the Barlow's point, certainly a critical need for safety. But when there's a seemingly easier fix than removing the tree, I would say let's keep the tree. And I would also say, if not Luther Burbank, who would put that tree? I do see significant historical value to that tree as well. And I do think that when people come into town, that to your point as well, it is iconic. I think whether you can articulate it mentally or whether it's just sort of a feeling, it's meaningful to discuss.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public would like to speak? Any other online people? The
And
mysterious
I'll just
M.
ask,
Kelly.
Michelle, did you want to make a comment? And if you can, do you know how to raise your hand?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Carrie, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Carrie, I'm sorry to hear you're leaving. You've been very helpful. As a member of the public, you've always directed me on where to go. So best wishes to you. I did a little research on this tree, and one of the things that came up is I volunteer at the Jewish Free Clinic, where the Bunya Bunya tree is next to the Salvation Army. It's over a sidewalk, and watched the process of that tree. And the cones only produce every 3 years. So those cones are trimmed to prevent that falling. And I guess, with respect to the Barlow building processes, the tree has been there for 100 years, dropping materials from the tree. So I would have definitely been mindful not to build to where things could fall on a roof from that tree. So as many of us know, if you build under a redwood tree, you might have a large branch go onto your roof in the winter. So I just want to give a heads up to that. I found it very interesting that most people I talked to in Sebastopol believe that Luther Burbank planted that tree. And I think that's pretty relevant, even though I can only find records of trees being planted in Petaluma by Luther Burbank and Santa Rosa. So there's a lack of documentation, but it's generally believed that. So thank you for your consideration. I really do appreciate the discussion.
All right, thank you for that.
Anyone else from the public who'd like to make a comment on this item?
All right, well, let's bring it back to the board for discussion.
And actually, I did just want to see if our city attorney wanted to say anything about the liability concerns before your deliberations. I did let him know the 20-foot fall radius is, the sidewalk is with, and the entry to the building is within that. So I just wanted to check in with him.
I did not want to be in a position of sending over the lawyer to tell you that the tree needs to be cut down. So it's a funny thing that I had a similar question come up some 36 or 7 years ago. One of the first questions I had as a city attorney involved an application to remove some very large trees in town. And they ultimately were not taken down, and the city incurred the liability risk. In this situation, I just note that the arborist, Becky, who I've known for years, very sensitive to the history of our trees, very knowledgeable. Her original staff report raised quite an alarm in the sense that it talked about serious injury to passersby and pedestrians and so forth. I understand why the Barlow would be here wanting to have it removed without regard to who the tenant would be because of potential injury to the public. We've also heard today that there are potential management plan or mitigation measures that could be utilized to address that by the Barlow, the netting and potentially a trimming schedule. So I would recommend to the Barlow that they do that to make sure the public's protected. They're on notice right now of a serious condition from our arborist But from the city's perspective, I'd look at this mostly from the Barlow's perspective. If they have a dangerous condition there that they would need to mitigate, I don't see any issues where the city would have to do something like try and compel removal of that tree. So if you are not going to enforce or permit removal at this point in time, you might consider denying the application without prejudice so the Barlow could renew the application at a future date if that's the inclination of the board.
Thank you, Larry.
I have a question for Larry.
Yes. Go right ahead.
The Barlow offers many establishments that have alcoholic beverages served. Could not somebody leave a drinking establishment and kill somebody in their car?
That's been known to happen.
Yeah, so that's another type of a danger that we could face from the Barlow or the tree, right? I mean, there's many dangers out there. So that's the point that I'm making. I'm not asking you to respond to this, but.
Well, I would respond only in this sense that when dangers are known, then there can be raised a duty to mitigate those dangers because they are known. That's why bartenders are trained to try and identify people that are drinking too heavily, et cetera. So we have an ordinance like that in Sebastopol because that's been identified as a way to somewhat mitigate that problem here. So I do feel the same probably applies to this tree in some sense, that you'd want to have some kind of a plan to mitigate that danger if you were the owner of that property.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Larry while he's here? No? Thank you, Larry. Okay, so let's bring this back to the board for discussion. Maybe you want to start?
Sure.
Gary?
I'm glad to start. Yeah, you bet. Well, you know, it's, I don't want to say things that have been said over and over again, but as a landscape architect, I've looked at plant material on a number of occasions, sort of critically thinking, should it stay or should it go? And we have factors for those. And those factors are generally historic factors. They're sentimental factors. There may be a sentimental factor, and there's certainly an aesthetic factor. This tree has all four, 3 or 5. It's iconic. It's got them all. And it's hard to justify its removal when it's been there first. You know, quite frankly, it's been loved to death in a lot of ways. You want to nestle up next to it because you love it and you like to look at it. We've seen, you know, houses built around a big, beautiful oak tree, you know, as a courtyard tree. And it takes years for it to die, and it dies because you've loved it to death. You've trenched it, and let's just say that trees don't like people as much as people love trees. So what I understand, especially from an arborist perspective, is that you can't just say, I love all these trees, especially when you've impacted it to death. You know, look, we all drive by it. We've got asphalt around it. We've got very little mitigation measures around that tree, and there have been seemingly fewer given to it in its existing let's just say existing impacts. So I thought about this a lot, you know, and it's just that the tree needs to be kept for the love, not only for its people because of its sentimental value, its horticultural value, its aesthetic value, its historic value. And if we don't really think about its mitigation measures more carefully and more thoughtfully, then we're just going to go around taking everything out. And this tree board has seen trees be removed left and right because we're seldom seeing trees that are in a beautiful park setting where we get to look at them and go, wow, yeah, we're going to remove that tree. There's no target. There's no real risk. Well, this tree does have its risk, but we have to understand that we have to take risk in order to preserve things that are that important to the city. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Carrie. Melissa, you want to chime in?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're 100% right. I would also say that it's a much easier endeavor to mitigate the dangers of this than it is to just cut it down and hope that something else will sort of create an equivalent aesthetic experience, especially when it does have such historical value. I'm not indifferent to the damage. That thing's dangerous. But I think that we can absolutely mitigate it through design in a more thoughtful way than just bluntly chopping down a tree that's been here much longer than all of us and all of the buildings around it. I think we need to be smarter in the way we mitigate it. I think we need to be thoughtful. I think there's a management aspect of this. If a tree like that can exist in Courthouse Square and be allowed to be there in Santa Rosa and in a populated area, I think we can figure it out here on this corner. So I strongly would oppose removing this tree. And by the way, my tenure, which is relatively short on Design Review Board, I've never declined a tree removal. I think I'm pretty thoughtful about tree removal. This would be the first.
Thank you, Melissa. Lynn?
I want to really support Carrie's comments about, there's a lot of passion in this town for that tree. And, when the Barlow was first started, there was a considerable amount of discussion about that particular building at that corner and that tree. And that the Design Review Board then wanted that building built in a way that preserved and gave that tree space. And that acceptance is part of the master plan of the Barlow, that tree be accommodated. And that particular location is the most attractive location, commercially at least, in this town. It's something people see every day, thousands see every day coming into town or leaving. It would, to put a lot of concrete in, to make a play area, to expand the hard surfaces in there, would take away a very inviting piece of our town that is so, it's part of our town. Certainly there's that history, but and the love of it, and there's lots of ways to mitigate it. Now, I've heard all the talk about this thing, and it's supposed to be sharp, it's supposed to be dangerous, but it's light. It hardly weighs anything. It doesn't fall like a rock. I have soft hands, I can feel it prickling me, but it's maybe annoying in some ways, but you can walk on it, you can step on it. There's not going to be any serious injury from that. And if the cones are something that falls every 3 years during a certain particular time of year, and that is a real thing, there's ways to mitigate that. So I am all for keeping the tree.
Thank you, Lynn. Christine?
First of all, Carrie, that was a beautiful statement you made and appreciate it. So, in the long trajectory of history, we're just but a gnat. And this tree has been growing here for, according to Lori Cagwin, it could be as old as 140 years. And here we are, little gnats. And when we're gone and just dust in the breeze, that tree will still be there. And it's watched the entire history of the city of Sebastopol, its entire history. And I think we have an obligation to show some reverence towards nature and be stewards and not build and maybe back off a little bit. I mean, you look at the Barlow, I would suggest to that any potential tenant there that flood is a much greater danger to their operation. The building next door, the Animal Kingdom Veterinary Hospital, I know for a fact that the floodwaters go all the way up to the floor in that building. So, I mean, that's just a much greater danger. So I just find it appalling that we're in a way discussing this. Now, I want to read this one thing that Lori Cagwin wrote, which I thought was very interesting. We do not find many of these bunya trees anymore, mainly by botanical gardens, old estates, veterans' homes, universities. This tree is most likely 140 years old and speaks of history and bears witness to the struggles of man and nature. This tree is a living fossil from the Jurassic Age, one that survived the Ice Age and dinosaurs, and there are not many old ones like Sebastopol's bunya anymore. I can name a handful in all my years in this profession, visiting sites and gardens. Well, with a little bit more research, I have learned that it is indeed an endangered species. And I just find it appalling that we're even considering cutting this tree down. Appalling. And I think there's mitigation that we can engage in. And I think what this tree really deserves is its own little parklet and a placard, possibly donated by the Barlow, so that people can understand the importance of this tree and what it is. Obviously, I oppose the removal.
Well, we're not at the voting stage yet, but thank you for your comments. I would just add, I appreciate everyone's comments on the board very much, and I think to go to more the micro level, I think this site already has a lot of outdoor space, really nice outdoor space. The building itself has giant garage doors, so that's outdoor space even, right? The indoor space is outdoor space, and to add more outdoor space on the highway side just doesn't seem like the place I'd want to hang out if I was there. I'd be on the parking lot side anyway, and there's a really nice big patio on the parking lot side already, so it seems to me that if a new tenant wanted to come in there, it's a beautiful space already, and there's a lot of outdoor patio space, and one of those could be transformed into a kid space if that's the desire. So I think, if anything, you'd remove the one on the highway side to stay away from the tree if the tree is really an issue. So that's kind of, just what a particular design might be. But I think you could do nothing there and just figure out more mitigation measures for the tree itself, as people are saying. Unless there's further discussion, does someone want to make a motion, or how should we proceed on this item? I don't know, I guess Larry was bringing up how do we proceed that enables these mitigation measures to happen? Anyway, Kara, do you want to guide us on that?
I mean, I think Jennifer's here and has, as staff, if she has questions about the mitigations, I mean, the ideas are pretty clear. In terms of the application and a motion, the city attorney suggests denying without prejudice. That means if the tenant does, or if the Barlow does find some other additional concerns that can't be mitigated, then they could apply again for, come back with a new permit for removal and talk about it at that time.
And so if we deny it, just deny it, they still can't come back? Or denying it without prejudice is a different category of denial?
So denial without prejudice is a little bit more open, and actually, Larry, you're probably better at answering that question than I am.
I don't think
but in terms of the motion, we will need you would be directing staff to develop findings for denial. So.
The only reason I suggested denial without prejudice is a little more clear. There's been conversation, arborist raised the issue about possibly a different scenario if a tenant was identified and they needed to be re-examined in light of the actual tenant, that would occupy the space and what that design looked like. I just thought it made the record a little clearer that the board anticipates the possibility that the Barlow might return with an amended application of some sort once the tenant is identified, because I heard that conversation this afternoon.
Okay, Melissa?
If we want to protect this tree in perpetuity, do we just deny it with prejudice?
I don't think the board actually has the power to deny it in perpetuity, just as the comment had been made at the time that the Barlow was approved some 12 years ago. You wouldn't have been able to have done it even at that time. But your comments, of course, stand for themselves. They're part of the record. So I think that any renewed or changed application would have to be considered by a future board in light of the comments that you made this time with respect to this particular application. So I think those comments have strength in the future. But I also think the Barlow could assert at some point in time, this is a different scenario. We have a tenant identified as a different situation. They would want to return and have it re-examined.
Right, and Vice Chair, just in terms of the cities, some cities have zoning ordinances that say, or ordinances say if you're denied, you can't reapply for 3 years. The city of Sebastopol does not have that. So say struck by lightning, half a year from now, the situation's different as the city attorney, then yes, you could. But yes, so if you wanted to just do a straight denial based on the findings and the record that you guys have provided today, then that would be acceptable as well. The applicant will have the right to appeal, as all applicants do. But then your record will be there, and as Larry is noting, that would send the signal that something significant would need to change. Again, future boards could find differently, but that helps establish those thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Okay, hearing all that, would someone, Len, do you have any discussion?
I was just going to make a statement that, I'd like to see us just make a simple denial of this. And the whole landscaping corner is significant to the town. The setting of that tree is significant to the town. And to start building into that, I think and to open up that can of worms, I think would be not a good move. And so I'll make a motion now to make just simply, it's an outright denial of this application. That's a motion.
All right, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, I just have one comment.
Sure.
I would like to see that corner move towards parklet status. This is just a general comment for people to think about, and protect the corner and the tree. That's not part of this motion, but I want to put that on the record because I think that makes sense to me. And the Barlow can certainly do that. Just as I dream of having a parklet in front of my building, the Barlow can certainly do that too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other, Gary, you had a comment?
As a comment, I also support the notion of a denial. I'd like to just state for the record, the idea of a mitigation measure is, while it may sound great, it's not as easy as it sounds. This is a living specimen that is, again, struggling with lots of impact. While it just says great, it's a matter of somebody on life support. Do you go ahead and let them live for a long time, or do you pull the plug? So I just want it to be known that while this isn't pulling the plug, it may sound more romantic to say we want mitigation measures, but this is, again, a living specimen that is out of the control of really kind of anyone's hands. I need that to be known as a fact to the board, that if you've got a 18-inch tree growing in a 12-inch box, where's the love? So that's the reality of these conditions. Just to say that we want to mitigate it doesn't make it a magical fix.
Thank you, Carrie. Any other discussion before we vote? Comments? Could you call a vote then, John?
Yeah. Christine Lovell?
So a vote of
to vote to deny?
Correct.
Yay.
Lynn Diedler,
Yes.
Chair Langberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Henley,
Aye.
and Board Member Bush.
Aye.
And so that motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 absent of Marshall Balfe. So
5 ayes
5
Just
ayes,
5-0,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can't count today.
and 1 absent.
And with the 1 absent from Marshall. So that will, actually,
So-
I'll let Carrie describe the
Yeah.
process.
So we will return at the February 27th DRB tree board with a resolution with findings for denial. So, and then Larry, I'm going to ask you one more legal question, because usually when I've had denials on, we actually have the formal hearing at that time, denial motion at that time. It would be a motion at that time to adopt the resolution. Is that when the appeals period would start? You can just say yes or no if you know on, yes. Okay, so yeah, so the appeal period would start at that time. So, thank you.
Great.
And that will take another, just another vote, but obviously we have, you're directing staff to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, and thank you, Jennifer, and thanks everyone coming on that issue. So we have one other item on our agenda for another tree removal permit at 742 South Main Street.
Yep.
John?
So this is an application for the removal of 2 coast live oaks measuring 12.5 inches and 15.5 inches. The application states that the current insurance company will no longer provide coverage to the building if the tree is currently leaning on the building. And this, as the chair mentioned, this building is located at 742 South Main Street. It is zoned commercial and is currently being used as a self-storage facility. As this site is located in the general commercial zoning district, any tree that measures 10 inches or more in diameter breast height requires the design review board review and approval. For this application, Ben Anderson of Urban Forestry Associates, who is another consulting arborist for the city, reviewed the application and did a site visit on December 20th, and that staff report is attached. He notes in his report that the subject tree number 11, which is the 12.5-inch tree, is in contact with the gutter of the building and entire canopy is over the building. The second subject tree, which is on a property line, also noted as tree number 7, measures 15.5 inches, and it leans strongly over the property line fence and a shed on the adjacent property. As mentioned in the report, it does, the tree number 11 that comes in contact with the building has basically reached its limit of continued pruning for the building. It's kind of outgrown its capacity there. So the pruning on that on a regular basis would not enhance or lengthen the tree's survival rate. So with that, the arborist is recommending removal of both of these trees. I do want to note also in the report, there's a third tree on the site, which is noted as number 5. It is in poor condition and shows signs of disease and structurally unsound. So with that, it would be, it would meet the criteria of a tree removal should the applicant want to come back at a future meeting to request removal of that. It still would meet the 10 inches or more criteria to be reviewed by the board, but the arborist wanted to note that as the site visit was done. So we are recommending removal of both of these trees based on the findings that are in the report. The applicant is here, and I believe Ben is here.
So just to clarify, is tree number 5 large enough that it would require to come to the board?
Correct,
But it's
yes.
not coming to the board today.
It is not on the recommended removal or the request for removal today. It would
Right,
come
and-
back at
and
a
it
future
was not
meeting.
noticed, more importantly, so
Right.
from that perspective, it would need to come back.
Yeah. Question, Lynn?
Can we add number 5 to the trees and approve removal of number 5 today?
No,
Because it hasn't been noticed.
correct. It hasn't been noticed and it wasn't part of the application. That's part of your packet today.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, so we have an applicant here. Ben, do you want to make any presentation or have any comments?
Sean, if you have any comments
Oh, sorry.
about the project or the removal, you can come up to the podium and say anything. You're not required.
You're
to.
not required to, but if you want to. Okay.
Okay, then that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for our applicant? No? Okay. Any members of the public want to comment on this here agenda item? No? Okay.
And we didn't receive any additional public comments.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, let's bring it back to the board. If anyone would like to start on this one, Lynn, you want to chime in?
Is my mic on? It is?
No, it's not.
Okay. No light. Okay, I've talked to surrounding neighbors and the applicant about the tree situation in general, and all of the trees back there have been trimmed about 30 feet high, and they no longer perform their duty or their intent of screening the back of Big O Tire from the neighborhood. They're planted in an 8-foot strip there. They've certainly outgrown it, but because there's only high foliage on all those trees, nothing grows very well down below. And I think it's a bigger problem than just those 3 trees that were noted, that some total new work needs to be done there. And I would suggest either cutting those trees down to perhaps 4 feet, letting them rebud and become low-growing trees again, and by eventually trimming and shaping them into a regular tree. And then you get a new live oak tree in sooner, or simply removing all of them. They're really out of place, and the neighbors that are affected by these trees would like to see them go all the way along there. And I think if they were removed, you could replant and require a replant of some lower growing tree that adds a little beauty to the back of that building, and make that whole place start over one way or the other, either trim them down short or just totally replace them. And the applicant would like to know if those options are open, or we want to consider that. And so I think it might be good today to comment on those 2 options.
Thanks, Lynn.
So Lynn,
Christine?
what you suggested just now, if I heard correctly, was that the applicant would like to remove all of the trees? We can ask the applicant.
Come on up. Can you make sure your microphone is on there?
These trees are behind I would guess it's a 25 feet tall building in an 8-foot wide corridor between the south and this building. Oh, we have to turn it on? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. I start again? Yeah. Okay, these trees are behind this 20 feet. I would say it's more than 20 feet by the maybe 25 feet tall building. I don't think anybody will see them from the street. And the neighbors, I don't believe, enjoy these trees because on the other side of these trees, on the neighbor's side, inside the neighbor's property, which are all residential, there's a row of redwoods which are as tall or taller than these. And these are meshed in with these redwoods. At least most of them are. Maybe a few of them, there are no redwoods next to it. They've been a nuisance to the roof that we had there. And we've had to maintain the roof because of the leaves and the branches, and constantly go up and blow it off. Otherwise, they clog the drains. So about 7 years or 8 years earlier, I came down to the city and asked to remove them. And I was told that I can't. These are, you can't remove them. You just have to maintain them, which is what we did. Until this year, when last year, the insurance company gave us a notice that they're not covering the building anymore. So they dropped us. Then this year, we found another insurance company, and we had to pay about twice as much, but which is okay. It's part of the business. But then they sent an inspector, and the inspector came and said that a lot of faults with it that we had to take care of. One of the faults was these 2 trees. So then I went downtown and spoke with them, and the arborist, the lady, came over, and she said, that's fine. So I just went through the bureaucracy of filling out the forms and paying the money. And
So to answer
Right
my
here I
question,
am.
to answer my question succinctly, in your ideal scenario, you would take all of those trees out, and the ones behind the building.
Yeah, one of the things I forgot to tell you, which bears on what Lynn said a little bit earlier, is that when 7 or 8 years I came here to the city, they told me you can cut 1/3 of it down, but you can't cut everything. So that's what we did. And then this year they said again, 6 months ago, they said you can cut it again, 1/3 of it down. So we cut 1/3 of it down. So that's why it's just a huge trunk and just a little bit on top. If we can remove it, I think it'll be less headache for us. I mean, they don't bother us the way they are. It's just that you just have to maintain the roof all the time. But the less branches than they have, the less leaves they fall in, the less branches fall in, the less maintenance there is.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll just continue with my statement. Where I was going with that is I certainly, we've got the 2 noticed trees. I certainly approve. I see that those must come down. I saw the disease. I went back there. It's a muddy mess. I brought the wrong boots.
Yeah.
So, but I noticed the diseased tree, and that certainly needs to come out. But I would also support, if you applied in the future, I would support the removal of all of them in that location. I just wanted to let you know that. That's why I was trying to understand
Okay.
where you were coming from.
Okay.
So.
We'll talk after we remove these 3, I can go down and talk to see what do I have to do to mitigate it and replace it and see.
Right. I just wanted to let you know that I would certainly support, if you came back with another application properly noticed and all that stuff, I certainly would support the removal of that whole stand in there.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Okay, thank you for your presentation there and your answers. Melissa, would you like to weigh in?
If Lynn Diedler is saying to cut down a tree, then
We may as well just stop the meeting right now.
I think I've got to be in favor. I don't have anything further.
Okay. Gary?
Well, I also agree with my fellow board members. I went back there this morning. It's a muddy mess. And the 2 trees are definitely good candidates for removal. In addition to the rot, to confirm there is rot and significant decay on other trees back there too. So I think it's a matter of due time.
I don't have anything else to add. I guess, do we, in removing them, do they replace they have to do a replacement or pay in lieu fee, right?
Correct. As part of the permit that they've submitted, there is the replacement trees. Either they do the replacement trees based off of our list or pay the fee
Right.
to do so. So
Okay.
it's up to the applicant, and they have a year from the approval of the application to do so.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I just have one quick clarification. In the tree number 5, it's obviously diseased. In that situation, when you have a removal, do they still have to do the mitigation with the additional trees, or do they get to just remove?
So the other part of the tree ordinance does allow, there's an exemption section that allows for anything that's an imminent hazard, or there's a few other criteria. If that tree did meet one of those criteria, then it doesn't go through the full tree removal permit process. So then that one, if it met the criteria, would not be subject to the removal, the replacement.
These 2 trees that are noticed that we're discussing today, I would argue that they fall under the imminent hazard condition. Would you board members concur? I mean, the one's going over the fence on the back, I mean, that's a no-brainer. The other one's coming down on the side of the building and it's just leaning over. And
Right, but I don't know.
because you're going to ask, there's a lot of trees back there. He removes all those trees. We're going to ask him for mitigation. And while I love tree mitigation, it seems sort of ridiculous in this circumstance to me. Those trees probably just kind of went back there on their own volition and just kept growing because they were behind a building. I mean, I'm whacking back oak trees all the time on my property. They just grow like weeds, and it just would be seem a shame to have him pay a bunch of mitigation fees. There's nowhere for him to plant on his site, and I certainly wouldn't recommend planting trees. Wouldn't you agree? In that little strip there, it seems ridiculous. So I'm just trying to find a way for him to not have to, pay a bunch of mitigation fees.
Yeah, I want to second that too.
They're not imminent hazards? Oh, okay. Well, you know more than me.
Yeah, that
one seems like
determination-
it's going over the tree.
So
Okay.
that determination has to come through an arborist.
Okay,
or
well, yeah,
one of
no,
the
I
arborist
mean,
report,
I
so.
would totally defer to Becky
Yeah.
on that. Yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
I'm
Well-
just.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, those trees, they, they were part of the landscaping plan originally on that building. Yeah. There was a little to-do with a neighbor who wanted the trees moved over into his yard, but he also, since he sold his house, the new owner of the house wants them gone. But it was a requirement or part of the landscape plan of the development of that project. The other thing is they were put about 10 feet apart. And, for live oaks, it's making a hedge out of them kind of thing. And so I think that that warrants consideration of what kind of mitigation or replacement should happen there in the future.
Okay, any other, you guys want to comment on these comments at all? I mean, can we, as a board, recommend, that's not a good area to plant, so then the fee, it should just be paid into the fund? Is that allowed, or it's really up to the applicant?
It's really up to the applicant. I wouldn't want the board to tie a financial decision through a motion. I
Right.
think is kind of
Okay, well,
outside of
I
our-
think our comments can stand on that matter. So would someone like to make a motion on this one?
And I'm definitely happy to, work with the applicant and look at the city arborist as far as replacement species to go in there that, might be
That might
a little
work.
bit more
Mhm.
feasible. So,
Okay. Do we have a motion somewhere?
So I motion to approve the removal of the 2 trees that are noticed. I
Okay,
forget their numbers.
7 and 11. Do I have a second?
Glad to second that.
Any further discussion? Can we call a vote?
All right, Christine Lovell,
Aye.
Lynn Diedler,
Aye.
Chair Langberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Henley,
Aye.
and Carrie Bush.
Aye.
All right, so that motion passes 5 ayes with 1 absent of Marshall. So Sean, that this decision is appealable after 7 days from today. We will be working on your approval letter, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. All right, that's our agenda items. I just wanted to give a quick update on the Public Art Committee. We have approved 4 new sculptures to be in our sculpture garden at Ives Park. And then we are about to review applications for a commissioned art, public art piece at the start of the Joe Rodota Trail across from Hobmonk there. So that we're active in our art placement.
The 4 pieces that are soon to be commissioned, how many applicants were there?
The 4 pieces in the sculpture garden are not commissioned pieces. No, that's just it's a community sculpture garden, so it's kind of an open call. We had 5 submitted for, we selected 4. And good question. And then the commission piece, which, is funding the committee gets from development projects in town, is about to, we're about to come to the end of the deadline to submit for that. So I can update you next time on that one. So with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.